Today I'd like to ponder the question of where the notion of flat Earth came from, where the flat Earth model, where the thinking that the Earth was flat and the development of this way of understanding the world as being flat originated. Let me explain what I mean by this. First of all, let me say, well, I'm not a flat earther myself, and I'm dubious about the whole notion of the Earth being flat. I don't want to come across as dismissive or condescending or the way that non-flat earthers often talk about flat earthers. I have no wish to come across that way, even if as I said, I'm not prone to think that they are correct in their assessments. What interests me more, though, is the fact that they exist now and that they came from, it's seemingly out of nowhere. Ideologically speaking, theologically speaking. Let me explain what I mean by that. Now, I don't think it's inaccurate to say that most flat earthers are people who are religious, who have a perhaps fundamentalist Christian understanding or orientation. This may not be true of all of them, but it seems to be true of most of them. A lot of them talk about the description of the firmament in Genesis and how that is meant, what that is meant to mean, in the flat Earth model, so in other words, their orientation, was informed in some way by their biblical literalism. And when I say biblical literalism, again, I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's like a way of understanding where they're coming from as a starting point. Biblical literalists who are called fundamentalists sometimes, although the word fundamentalist kind of has a negative connotation to it. So I don't find that most biblical literalists or young Earth creationists, I don't know whether they would embrace the label fundamentalist. Maybe they would, but whether they embrace that label or some other label, I'm going to go with the label of fundamentalist here, again with the understanding that I don't mean that in any kind of negative, condescending or dismissive light. But here's where I get a little things get a little strange for me. People say, well, strange with flat Earth. Yeah. Well, yeah, the whole model is, I'll admit, strange. The whole notion that well, all we have is a plane, right, under a dome, and surrounded by an ice field. But then there might be something beyond the ice fields. That Antarctica isn't really just the south part of the southern part of the world, but it's all around. The world is circumscribed by an ice sheath or an ice wall. Anyhow, putting all of that aside, I'm old enough to remember the 80s and the 90s, and I grew up in the South, so I, of course, knew a lot of people who were very religious and people who were you would describe as fundamentalist Christians, fundamentalist Protestants, fundamentalist Baptists, or Pentecostalists, or the other various denominations that would believe in biblical literalism, believe that buying into the Bible as the Word of God entails believing that every bit of it is literally true, and therefore that the earth was created literally in 7 days, as the account is given in Genesis, and that the world is can be said to be around 6,000 years old, 6,000 years and change. Okay, and they come up against those who would say that the world, what most people would say today is that the world is much older than that, and that it formed over time, and over millions of years. They would say no, the earth came into being around 6,000 years ago. But here's the thing, here's the crux of the matter, if you will. When I was, during the 80s and the 90s and into the 21st century even, knowing these people who were fundamentalists and biblical literalists, and having a fairly good grasp of their theology, never being one of them myself, but understanding where they came from for the most part, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that none of them believed in the flat earth model. Now, when I say none of them, of course, maybe there were oddballs here or there in the 80s and 90s who would have argued that the earth was flat. But I'm telling you that these hardcore fundamentalist, young earth creationist, biblical literalists, these kinds of people, there was no attempt to try to say that the Copernican model of the planets and the solar system was wrong. There was no attempt to say that the world was not a globe. There was no attempt to say that that outer space was fake, and that we were being lied to by NASA and all these other kinds of things. There was just none of that. That was not part of the mix at all. And these were, again, hardcore kind of people. And again, hardcore doesn't mean bad. It's good to be hardcore. It's good to be firm in your beliefs and so forth, as long as your beliefs are the correct ones. These were rock solid people. These were, not the kind of people who would compromise with modernity or compromise with modern secular thought. But none of them had any problem with thinking of the earth as a planet, as the third planet from the sun, as part of a solar system, which was part of a galaxy, which included many other stars, with many other planets, presumably orbiting those stars. There was no problem with any of that notion whatsoever. So what I want to know is, what I'm interested in knowing is when it started, that, or when and how this whole notion originated, that being Bible believers, Bible literalists, young earth creationists, and so forth, when this transition was made with some fundamentalist Christians, that we were being lied to, and that the Bible told, we were being lied to that the world was round, and that the Bible told us that the world was flat, and that the firmament, what's translated into English as the firmament, indicated the flatness of the earth, indicated the dome that we, the sort of notion that the entire earth was not flat in the sense that they would deny that there are mountains or deny that there are hills, but simply that the world's not rounded. Where did that come from? Where did that originate? Who was the first person, the first religious believer who said, we need to stop believing that the earth is round, because that's not biblical to believe that. When did that get started? It just seems to me like, looking from the perspective of 2021, even from 10 years ago, I would never have thought there would be this movement called the Flat Earth Movement. Maybe it was already around 10 years ago, I don't know. But I would have never thought that there would be people out there saying, yes, we believe that the earth is flat. We are flat earthers. And that wasn't for a lack of hardcore fundamentalist, biblical literalist Christians out there. All right. So the crux of my question is, the crux of my inquiry for all of this, and the reason for my recording of this video, is just to ask the question, when did that start and why? When did it begin? Who first decided that being a biblical literalist meant you had to believe in flat earth? Not that all biblical literalists believe flat earth, of course. I'm not meaning to say that. I imagine most of them still don't. But how did that notion gain ground? How did it gain followers and become this whole movement, this whole understanding of things in and of itself? Some might say it's a psyop, and they might be right. I'm open to that possibility. But I just, what's most mystifying to me is I don't see why we went from biblical literalists who believe in a round earth and the Copernican model and outer space and all of that, and none of that interfered with them believing that the earth is 6,000 years old and Genesis is to be taken literally. How that became, for some, this new doctrine of flat earth, which seems to have, again, really developed over the last decade. So if anyone has any answers, whether you're whether you yourself are a flat earther or not, I'm interested in what I'm interested in anyone's insight as to how this happened. Now, please notice I'm not inviting a debate about whether the earth is flat or not. I don't really, that doesn't interest me for my purposes here. I'm wanting to know when and how the notion of belief in flat earth came to be a thing. When, how, and why that took place. Those are the questions that really interest me here. Thanks for watching. My name is Andy Nowicki. You can check out my work at altrightnovelist.com.